Oh yeah, you got to get it to $7,000. It's fun at 7. I apologise, I'm a bad passenger. Shit. Slow down, please.
That is really not fast, I can assure you.
I'm not used to this, actually shaking. Oh gosh, I know you know the roads, but shitting now.
Suzuki currently make 7 different cars. Did you know that? I didn't know that. And let's be honest here, about the only 2 that I can actually think of, if you prompt me, would be the Swift Sport and the Jimny. The new Jimny apparently has proven very popular, and the Swift Sport is, well, a darling amongst the young car enthusiast scene, and in fact, it's the sort of car that has an awful lot of admiration and respect from very well-matured road testers, and it's got that kind of evergreen appeal, the Swift Sport. This is what I'm driving today. It is a 2012 Swift Sport here in a very metallic red. And this car's owner and channel fan has brought it down to me, and it's actually rather quite nice. Now, the first thing that struck me about this car is actually how large it is. Now, weight-wise, this car is actually lighter than the Renault Sport Twingo 133 that I drove recently. Price-wise, these are a little bit stronger, but then they are a newer car. You could get an earlier generation Swift, of course, but this is the first of this particular generation being introduced in about 2012, and they were then replaced, I think, about 2017 or so. Now, it's got a 1.6 litre naturally aspirated engine producing about 130 horsepower and a similar amount of torque, actually slightly less. It is enough on the right road to terrify a cautious passenger, as I've found out. But in comparison with the Renault, because I think that's the fairest thing to compare it to, it's got a beautiful gear change and an extra gear, so it's a 6-speed rather than 5-speed, and it is actually quite a big car. Now, this interior actually feels pretty good, to be honest. This is a cheap car. I mean, a brand spanking new modern Swift Sport is about £17,500, and it is, by the way, the most expensive thing on Suzuki's website. They really are one of those companies that, if you ask me what they do or why you buy Suzuki, I couldn't give you a reason to not buy one, but I also couldn't think of a brilliant reason to buy one. However, they just seem to have got things about right with the Swift Sport. It is not massively cheaper on the face of it than, let's say, a Fiesta ST, and it is in a completely different insurance bracket and I guess kind of therefore target market to that car. So this isn't really a direct rival, but if you're looking at something that's going to be cheaper to run, cheaper to insure, but still practical, then it's a good option. Now, Jonathan is the only person in his group of friends with a car, which means, of course, that he has to play taxi all the time. And this car's not too bad at that. There is actually a pretty decent amount of room in the back, and the passengers in the rear even get their own armrest and cup holder each, which is nice. So you got somewhere to stick your Red Bulls and your cans of Monster Energy and your McDonald's fizzy drinks when you do your McDonald's drive-thru, which of course is exactly what you're going to do when you're young and you got mates in the car. Now, up front, it's actually not a bad view from where I'm sitting. You feel like you're sat reasonably high, but not obscenely so. It's not discomfortingly high. The stereo down here and the HVAC controls are all relatively basic, as you'd expect in a fairly cheap car, but it does have Bluetooth, so that's something nice, and it does have aircon, which definitely works because it's a very warm sunny day today and we're getting lovely cool air pumped out of the vents here. The newer cars are much higher rent on the inside, as as you would sort of expect them to be. However, when you're looking at one of these, there's a good chance that this is going to be either your first car or your first sort of sporty, fun car. I mean, I'm spoiled, basically. I get used to driving big horsepower, very fast cars as a matter of course. I forget that once upon a time 130 horsepower was a lot. This car has recorded an average of nearly 45 miles to the gallon on the journey down to come and see me. Now, I'm going to do my best to worsen that, but that's not too bad. In fact, the only real negatives in terms of practicality that I've spotted so far are the very annoying boot opening, which has a really high lip. The boot space is okay for this class of car, but access to the boot is unnecessarily difficult. And the keyless entry system is rather dim-witted, and that's its owner's own words. I mean, I haven't really had much experience of it, but he says in day-to-day running, it never quite does what you want or expect it to. However, that's not what the Swift Sport is famed for. It's famed for its ability to put a smile on your face down your favourite back road, which conveniently, I'm now on. Now, this car, when it came out, was £13,500, which is not a lot of money at all, even in 2012. Its direct rivals really would have been things like the Abarth 595. And compared with that car, I'd say the interior is sort of on par. It's got less of the sort of fun, quirky retro stuff that I so detest in the Abarth. The gearbox is really sweet, and the engine is actually a joy. It sounds pretty good, I gotta be honest. For a little naturally aspirated 1.6, it makes a pleasant noise. Now, it doesn't have the turbocharged torque of the little Fiat lump, but that makes it all the more rewarding, and it will rev all the way out to about 7,000, although some way after 6 it starts losing interest. But it's nice to see that high red line down there. It makes it feel like it deserves that sort of sport moniker. Now, the suspension in my spoiled, wizened old eyes is actually pretty decent. It rides quite nicely, and this is a difficult and testing road. You can heel and toe very easily in the car. The steering's not the most talkative, but you know what the chassis is doing. Its natural instinct is for a little bit of understeer, and it's actually quite nice to have a car you can kind of throw around a little bit. You know what this car's acting as for me today? I mean this not on a practical level, not like a personal level, on a level with you guys. It's a bit of a palate cleanser, really. I've been driving some really nice, high-end, cool cars. The last thing I drove down here was the old C43 AMG, and getting back in something like this, it's a little bit of a back-to-basics, pared-back, stripped-down car. It just reminds me how much fun I can actually have in something quite simple. When the road is good and clear, we're actually really lucky with the traffic or lack of today. This is a real delight. And I've said many times, whenever I review a hot hatchback, that it has to be both hot and hatchy in equal measure. Now, this doesn't do too brilliantly on the hatchy bit because you've got that really impractical rear. Really, it is the small boot that's going to knacker your thumb for any sort of longer trips away. If you want to go out with a bunch of your mates, you want to go camping or something like that, you are going to have to get somewhat inventive with what it is that you take. But in fairness to the car, what do you expect from something this size? To drive, though, it is very easy, very enjoyable. It has all the creature comforts one could really need. And at that new asking price of $13,500, I can see why people kind of fell for it. On the used marketplace, these are going for about £4,000 to £5,000 and upwards. So for a relatively new car, they're actually pretty well priced. They tend to be very reliable as well. Suzuki got a decent reputation for that, and it's a good looking thing as well. It's the sort of thing that if I had someone come to me that's 18, 19 and they want a kind of half decent first sporty car, actually, yeah, I'd say go for it. Now, would I have this or the Twingo 133? That's a very difficult question. I think I would actually go for this. The Twingo feels like it's a class down size-wise, but it unfortunately also feels a lot cheaper on the inside and just a bit lower rent overall. Having the old gearbox and all that sort of stuff doesn't really help it. And this just feels like a more complete car. It's also impressively quiet in here, very well refined for what is ultimately a small cheap hatchback, and that is a genuine surprise to me. So there you have it, the Suzuki Swift Sport. It really is a great little fun do anything car. So thank you all for watching. Please like, comment below, hit the subscribe button if you haven't already. We'll see you for the next one. Bye bye.